facility, all males. Age ranges from, I've had 18 up to about 80, believe it or not. I don't think I've had anything above 80 yet. 79, 80 years old, I think is my oldest gentleman that I've had. Really, it's just, my day-to-day duties are making sure that I am managing the program successfully. That's making sure that my case managers are abiding by what the DOC rules and regulations are when it comes to providing the treatment that these clients are looking for while we're in the program. My program's a little different than, let's say, Roger Sherman and or Sierra down in New Haven. Those are quote-unquote work release programs. Their clients will stay on average about 6 months. I'm a temporary placement, meaning my folks really average stays about 30 days, and the wording is there, it's temporary. So they're waiting for another bed at, let's say, Sierra or Roger Sherman to open up so they can get into a work release program. They're waiting for a higher level of care, meaning if they are a registered sex offender, they're going to go to our treatment facility that we have in Uncasville that is based on the treatment of sex offenders and how the different techniques and utilizations that they utilize to work on making sure that they don't recidivate, making sure they don't recidivate and having, sexually deviant behaviors. Some guys I get, their EOS or end of sentence is within a couple weeks, so it's just making sure that, whatever identifications that they don't have, or, if we need to start looking for supports for them and or get them ready. They don't have any supports and they don't have a house to go to, so we make sure that we get them in with 211 to make sure that they are discharging to a shelter or something along those lines.
I figure that's probably a big part of your job is finding a home for people to go to.
Housing's huge. Yeah, housing's huge.
I've been reading up on kind of like prison release and kind of like housing can be a big issue with that. Not having somewhere to go can often like extend your stay months and months and months, whether that be a prison or a halfway house.
Yep.
So I guess what types of programs and things do you have to help with housing? And do you use some of those as a temporary shelter? Do you send different residents to do you send, I guess, people from different halfway houses? Do people move around kind of when they're looking for housing to be found?
So, like you said, housing can become very difficult. Some guys, what they'll do is instead of being released to a halfway house, they'll complete their full their full sentence in prison. So the day they get released, that's it. They're done. They're not with parole anymore. They get discharged, and it is what it is. And then the big problem is, okay, where do they go after that? In Connecticut now, 211, you have to do a assessment. You have to get put on a waiting list for one of our shelters in Connecticut. So sometimes, once you have that, set the date for the assessment, and by the time you get into a shelter, that can be up to a month. So yeah, I think housing is a big hurdle right now as a whole that we're really trying to work towards to alleviate. When it comes to me and housing, so my case managers, obviously for guys that I have, if they're working, our big responsibility is making sure that they're saving money. They show us their banking information on a weekly basis every time they get a paycheck. They're very limited to how much money they can spend on a weekly basis, so they can make sure that their savings account has enough money for once if they do discharge. From there, I've built some relationships with landlords here in the Middletown area. If they have a bed available, they're more than willing to open up and let my guys take a look. If they can afford it, they can go there. When it comes to, I also have I do have sex offenders as well, which, they have a lot of stipulations when it comes to apartments where they can't be near parks or they can't be near schools. So I also have a few landlords here in the city of Middletown that I've worked with, in the town of Middletown, that I work closely with. Actually, I'm successfully discharging 2 of my guys, one today and one tomorrow, who are on the registry and are going to be able to find housing now. So, yeah, I try to build as much relationships as possible. That's a big part of my job, is building relationships with people in the community, going out advocating for my guys, through employers, through landlords, so I can have as much resources as possible. Middletown, I'm grateful because Middletown's it's booming right now, between jobs and they're really building a lot of new apartments. We have, a bunch of agencies here that really help when it comes to basic needs, with like Rushford, Middlesex Behavioral Health. Those folks really help out with the basic needs aspect for these guys, and they assist. Once we find the apartment, they'll assist in paying first and last month's rent, the security deposit, things like that. So I really work closely with them.
So in terms of like the services that you have for, say, like someone with mental health issues or someone with drug issues, your employees, are they kind of specially trained or specially tailored to manage different types of problems, or is it kind of a general basic training?
So none of my employees are therapists. They're not counselors. Yeah, I see about, give or take, 450 guys per year. My fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30th. So within that, the past 2 years I've been in this position, I've averaged about 400 guys. So you can only imagine the different types of people that we see on a daily basis, because I have a high turnover rate. So my case managers were not certified clinicians, like I said. What I'm grateful for, I am on Connecticut Valley Hospital on the property. So right across the street, I have River Valley Services. I have, Mobile Crisis, which is a phone call away, and they're just a walk away. I just had a guy not too long ago. He was suicide ideations. He was burning himself with a lighter. How to handle that situation as a case manager, seeing that one-on-one, my case manager did really well de-escalating the situation. But obviously, he needs a higher level of care. We called in, state police, we called Mobile Crisis, and we called the ambulance to come. There's only so much we can do. We're not certified. They can tell us, I'm fine, but we're not the professionals, and we're not going to take that risk and sign off on that. So we'll definitely refer to a higher level of care, and if needed, discharge them from the program so they can get that higher level of care.
Yeah, that must be very convenient, having the hospital right next to it.
It's phenomenal. It's, especially having River Valley Services on site. I do have a mental health parole officer who specifically sees folks who have severe mental health disorders. So her and I work really closely when, she does have 3 or 4 of her guys in my program. And then I work really closely one-on-one with the lead psychiatrist at River Valley Services, with the intakes, and then continuing through with the treatment during that time.
Where do most of your employees come from? And what kind of backgrounds do you think lead to a job at a halfway house or a rehabilitation center?
It's a good question. I have a case manager who came into the program. He worked down Ryder Sherman for a few years. Was going back to get his associate's degree. Unfortunately, never got it, but he worked here for a good amount of years, so he became a case manager. I have, folks who are going. I have 2 right now who are going for their LMSW, so license in social work, masters in social work. I have one guy right now who wants to be a cop. I have another one who, is really, not my case managers, but I have my client service aides who, are really thinking about maybe getting into corrections and wanting to be a CO or a correctional a correctional counselor, something like that. So they're just getting their feet wet. I feel like, with a halfway house format, it's more of just getting into the field. Okay, I really want to do social work, or I really want to be in the social service field. To start off, this is a good entry-level position for folks to get in, see what they're getting into, how to handle with that population of DOC type clientele, and then go from there. If they stay, they stay. If they progress up in and become a supervisor or a manager, that's phenomenal. But it's entry-level position, and then just work your way up, or move on to being a probation officer, a parole officer, corrections officer, something like that.
I had a question about like sleeping overnight. Do you have any employees that stay overnight and kind of keep tabs, I guess, on everything during the night, or is it kind of like, do you have maybe like hall monitors or some sort of system like that?
So I'm a 24-hour program, 365. There's never a down moment. So I do have third shifters at work, 11 to 7 shift. It's a non-sleeping shift. It's awake hours at all times. All my employees during their shift are required to do hourly head counts because we are accountable for these guys. So the accountability is huge. So they do that with their head counts. But yes, no, there's no sleeping. It is awake hours 24/7. So whoever's working, your eyes are open, you're working, you're doing things, you're moving.
Tough work. So I had a question about kind of healthcare and kind of how that works for inmates. I know that like when you're there, you pay like is it 30% or 50% of what you're making to the house that you're at in order to stay if you have a job outside?
So that's for rent.
Yeah, for the rent. And I was kind of wondering, is there any sort of coverage or program for healthcare, or is it like does the state help with that at all, or is it kind of like on the company?
So all my folks, well, 98% of my folks are on Husky Healthcare, and that is through the Department of Social Services. If they are working, they can still be on Husky. They just have to make sure they're under the annual family allowance that DSS requires. And like you said, yeah, I pay. So per paycheck, 30% of that paycheck up to $100 is what they have to pay in rent. Depending if they are on Medicare, I always say Medicare, Medicaid, sometimes messed up in my head. But Medicare, that is for folks, Medicaid is for folks, that's your DSS, that's your Husky. Your Medicare, your retirement, you're receiving, your retirement, something along those lines. They go through Medicare. So they can have Medicare, Medicaid. They can have both, but Medicare would be the primary, with Medicaid being the secondary. So that's the federal, is the Medicare, and the state is the Medicaid.
I think I've read kind of a bit about like kind of in some sort of prison systems, like having healthcare be kind of like on the burden of the house, kind of like make it harder for I guess the company to like want to report every issue that they have. So I guess having it like the state helping it does definitely alleviate that pressure. And
Absolutely.
Like, makes it like easier and even more moral system.
So what's nice with what DOC does is once guys discharge from the prison system, they're given a 30-day supply of medicine, so they can take that prescription. They can bring it to a pharmacy. For us, they bring it to us. We bring it to our main pharmacy that we always utilize. And the state pays for that first 30 days. Obviously, during that first 30 days, then it's the responsibility of making sure you turn on your Husky or turning on your Medicaid benefits, and then making sure that you see your doctor, you follow up so you can refill these prescriptions, because after 30 days, that's it. You have to make sure that you're following up with your own PCPs. And that's another thing that we, as the halfway house, have the responsibility of, okay, we know that you're here, you have this sometimes 15 days, sometimes 30 days supply of medications. We need to make sure if you're a high mental health client, or you have some medical issues, that you do follow up with primary care. We work one-on-one with the community health center. They come to our program every other week, and they meet with our guys for 4 hours. So they sign up, they meet with the APRN, and we can get that ball rolling, so we can make sure that their medications are all set and taken care of.
I have some questions about kind of like the structuring of the facility and kind of how monitoring works and kind of surveillance systems and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, we do rounds every hour. It's accountability, head counts every hour. And with that being said, I always find myself, if I'm not too busy, I always advocate for my staff. Even though that we did a head count every hour, making sure that we're just making our faces known. Making sure that it's not a repetitive time we always do our head counts. And we know where the guys are at all times. Excuse me. We do have cameras. I actually am putting through to get more cameras installed at the Eddy Center complex. I'm looking at, right now I have So I have 7 cameras right now, and I'm actually trying to add another 12, believe it or not, to the facility. Absolutely, because you run the risk of having these blind spots and what have you. So we're with that 12, the proposal of 12 will alleviate all the concerns I have personally about the blind spots and things like that. So it'll be well monitored at that point in time.
Yeah, and I was wondering about like privacy and kind of like what kind of private spaces do different like residents have in their how bunking works too.
So they don't have single rooms. I have 14 rooms altogether. Out of those 14 rooms, it's either a 2-man, a 3-man, or a 4-man. I only have one 4-man room, but then it's either 2 or 3-man rooms. Each room, it's like kind of like a dorm room aspect where you have one room, might be a 3, and then you have another room connected, and in between would be your bathroom. So 6 men could be potentially sharing, one bathroom. They have their own rooms. They're doored. The windows aren't barred, so it's not like it's not like that jail sense. But it also is a sense that they can't lock themselves into their rooms. They can't. My staff, male and or female have to make sure they announce that they're coming in. But male staff, obviously we give them the courtesy of knocking, but I don't have to wait for them to say come in or anything like that. So they do have some privacy, but we also have to remember that, in times of we need to come in, we're coming in, because we need to make sure. I carry an Narcan kit. My staff carries an Narcan kit 24/7. I'm not going to wait for somebody to say come in if they're, using or overdosing or something along those lines. We have to make sure we're ready to go 24/7.
Moving off of what you just about kind of like needing to break in and kind of like drug usage, how that could be a problem. How often is that kind of a problem for you?
Well, I'm knocking on wood because I pray to God every night that I don't get a phone call that I had a client overdose. For me, I've been working at the Eddy Center. I've been managing the Eddy Center for almost 3 years now. I've had a total of 3 overdoses, 0 deaths. God, you're jinxing me. Not gonna, I'm not gonna
Get
everything right now. Oh goodness. So with that being said, it's just one of those things. Unfortunately, there's so much we can do, but there's other things. Like I said, the windows aren't barred. You know what I mean? I have, a whole row of windows that are out in a parking lot, so somebody could just pull up and throw something into a window, and how would we know? We don't pat down guys when they come in. We will search through bags. We will use a metal detector. A wand, but other than that, if they have any means possible to get something in, guess what? They're going to get it in. When it comes to ballooning, or if you don't know that, I'm sure you can Google it and you can see what ballooning means. But ballooning, or things along that lines of where they know how to get it in, and there's only so much as staff we can do. We do room searches on a weekly basis. If we don't get all 14 rooms in that week, we're not doing our jobs. So making sure that we really do thorough looks of bag searches and making sure that they're lifting their pant legs up and undoing their pockets and doing these room searches also, makes the facility safer and safer for the clients that are there and my staff.
Do you like often drug tests, or is
Oh, we do random drug tests again on a weekly basis. I have an online system. I really try not to get away past 2 weeks. So at least twice a month, these guys are being drug tested. Breathalyzers, we'll do random breathalyzers on a weekly basis. When it comes to guys who have history of substance use, I'll make sure that maybe they're more on a once a week. And that's not trying to get them in trouble, you know what I mean? That's trying to make sure that they don't go back to using, and they know that they can come talk to my staff when they have these urges or they feel that, some kind of way, as I like to say, that makes them want to go back to using. Being monitored definitely does help, but it's also that open communication where they need to learn how to have that open communication with people. Because once they're off parole and once they're not in a halfway house anymore, they need to know that when you have a support system like that and you're feeling like you're having a bad day, going back to a bag or a beer is not always the answer. Talking it out and having somebody to listen to you makes all the difference in the world.
Is the facility completely like sober, as in no alcohol or no cigarettes, or?
So yes, no cigarette. they find cigarettes, trust me. But yes, no alcohol, no tobacco. It's a smoke-free facility. It's a drug-free facility. Like I said, no. If a guy walks in, I can smell alcohol on his breath. First thing I'm doing is breathalyzing him. Or if I walk into a room and I can smell alcohol, first thing I'm doing is clearing that room, getting everybody down, breathalyzing them, and searching that room. It's zero tolerance when it comes to stuff like that because we have people that in the program that are working towards their sobriety. I have guys that have been sober, 10 years, and this is their first time out in the community, and they have to deal with the pressures of other guys and this, that, what have you. And that first smell of marijuana or that first smell of crack or heroin or something like that, that could trigger them to want to use, or that first smell of beer or what have you. So it's just one of those things that zero tolerance. Obviously. Now, we're really pushing for that whole reform aspect. So you have a first-time offender who relapses or has a dirty positive urine. We're trying to utilize other techniques to where, okay, this is your first violation. Prison is not always the answer for everybody. You know what I mean? So remanding back is not always the answer. Let's, you're going to Middlesex now, maybe let's refer you to a higher level of care like Rushford or Gilead or River Valley Services. We're not just going right to the point of, okay, you screwed up, you violated your parole, you're going back to prison, because that's not the answer. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, prison facilities have phenomenal, they have phenomenal groups, they have phenomenal programs and services for these guys, but it's not always the answer. It's not. Excuse me, just real quick. Hi, it's Josh. I'm sorry? I'm not. I'm at corporate. I'm at corporate right now. I'll be heading back there within the hour. Okay. You got it. Sorry about that.
So, keeping in that kind of vein, what kind of punishments or kind of like systems of responsibility do you have for inmates once they say like break their own like sobriety? Is there kind of like a way that you step in there to kind of enforce any sort of punishment, or is it more on them to kind of control themselves?
So it's on them. I mean, I can only do so much, right? I like to say, it's an old saying, we can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? I can put all the tools in your belt to make sure you succeed, but if you don't want to succeed, it's on you. So a big thing, I have a guy that comes from the community health center once a week. He runs a substance abuse group. I have, one of my case managers who runs an AANA type of format of meeting, and then another case manager who runs another type of format of a substance abuse group. And then in Middletown we have tons of AANA meetings that occur on a daily basis. I have Rushford. Again, we can be an ear, we can be a listening ear. I had a guy that came who didn't get remanded back to prison. He might have gone back maybe a week or two, but then the board released him. Prior to going in, he was on 100 bags of fentanyl a day. Excuse me, 100 bags. That's how he's still alive is mind-boggling to me. He was probably in one of the worst spots any person can be in. You can just tell. And actually, he just successfully discharged. He was with me for about 4 or 5 months, working, making really good money, has a great support system. He just needed the eye-opener of like, dude, come on. You have phenomenal supports, okay? We're putting you in all these phenomenal programs, all right? If you screw up, you screw up, okay? But do not go back to drugs. That's not the answer. Did he have a couple of screw-ups? Well, not relapses, but did he get in trouble a couple times when he was in the program? Yup. I was the first person to make sure he had police contact one time. I was the first person to call him and be like, dude, okay, listen. Not getting remanded, okay? Because sometimes that's all they have in their head. It's like, I screwed up. I'm gonna go AWOL. I am, gonna go off the deep end, start binging, start doing something. And if parole finds me, they find me. If I'm dead, I'm dead. They get into that mentality of I don't care. So just again, like I said, being that my staff is being an open ear, listening. Referring folks to making sure that they're in the right programs, following up with their clinicians on a weekly basis, having that conversation with the clinician of, I've seen how, this gentleman has been acting a little off. Has he been off to you? These are my concerns. And having those conversations with the providers means a lot. So, and the clients see that. And they know that we have their back. So as long as they know that we have their back, sometimes that builds that trust. And when you have that trust that's built, these guys can be successful. They really can. They're human beings. You know what I mean? Yeah, we can't. They feel like, oh, well, they got that felony, and that's going to change everything. No. I have guys that work. I have guys that are making. Like I said, this one guy is making $70,000, $80,000 a year. Like, he's making more money than I am. What the heck? That's not right, No, I'm kidding when I say that. But he's very successful, and he just has a substance abuse problem. And that substance abuse problem led him into, led him to prison. And hopefully, knock on wood, he's learned from his mistakes, and he won't make those mistakes again. He'll continue being sober and successful for the rest of his life.
So, kind of asking about like how often do people kind of is recidivate the word?
Yep.
How your rates compare to say like the national average or like
average? Well, I know Connecticut as a whole, our recidivism rate is up. I think up 71%, 72%.
Which is I think below the national average.
I don't know what the national average
I read
is. Okay.
$75. But it was kind of like a book that was 4 years ago. So
it's so. But in my opinion, 71, 72% is very high. We just got trained in a new assessment through the University of Cincinnati, and my instructor, she was the deputy warden of a corrections institute in Colorado, and their recidivism rate was 30%. Which is, wow, exactly. Holy smokes, that's huge. So with that being said, I think, as a whole, the state, we're really pushing for this whole reform thing, which is phenomenal. As a state, we definitely have some things that we need to work on when it comes to recidivism. Going back to, your comment about housing, I think that if we can get more housing for these guys, I think our recidivism rate is going to drop dramatically. A lot of our homeless population is our incarcerated population. Don't know the numbers on behind that, but I'm sure if you looked into it, it's probably a good amount. So with that being said, if we can find good jobs for these guys, if we can find housing, I think housing is even more important than jobs because I work closely with the food bank here in Middletown, St. Vincent de Paul, and a lot of these guys are working, just have nowhere to go. They can't afford an apartment here in the state of Connecticut. You know, you need to be living with 1, 2, or 3 different people on a minimum wage job. You can't afford an apartment on a minimum wage job. So those are, I think, the barriers that we have right now as a state, is to making sure that we try to find some transitional housing for folks that are coming out of incarceration. The connection is really, we have a program called the REACH, Re-Entry Assistance, REACH, I can't think of off the top of my head what the acronym for REACH stands for, but REACH is huge. And these guys are either coming out of the prison system, they're still on parole, but they get put into an apartment. And with the expectation that you're going to find a job within the first 6 months, you're going to start paying rent. So they get that feel of living on their own again. I think if we can get more programs like that, more reaches, more transitional housing, more Section 8 vouchers, more RAP certificates, I think that's really could potentially make a big difference in a lot of these guys' lives, male and female.
Definitely. So as a short-term kind of like how inmates or residents come for like short amounts of time to your facility, do you get the chance to really like develop like personal bonds with the people that come, or is it kind of like do you hesitate from forming those kind of personal relations?
Well, always being in this field, you have to have boundaries. I talk about boundaries in every staff meeting. I talk about boundaries in every interview. I talk about boundaries in every supervision I do with my staff members. Boundaries are huge. Yes, we're here to help. No, we're not here to be personal. You have to make sure you draw that line between work and personal, because that can be a disadvantage. If you really start building a bond with these guys or with any type of folks when you're working in any type of social service field, you know, but if there's a negative outcome towards it, that can affect you personally and mentally. You know, big thing with this field, burnout is, you know, it's huge. It really is. And you know, as a case manager, as a client service aide, as a program manager, I'm working. You know, we're working with these folks 40, you know, I'm upwards 50, 60 hours a week. You can't build relationships. You can build working relationships, but you can't build personal relationships. You just can't do it. You really need to make sure, I like to get to know my guys, I do. I will sit down at least once or twice during a 30-day stay and really have a good conversation with every single man that steps into my program. Sometimes that's to learn a little bit more about them, and that's to make sure that they get the best treatment possible while they're in my program. So to answer your question, no, you just can't. You really can't build, you know, close relationships due to the fact that we have to remember we do have a job. And, you know, once you start building these relationships, you can start finding favoritism. You can't have favoritism in these programs because if one guy sees that you're favoring another one, they're going to start, they'll call you out in a heartbeat. And then next thing you know, you have a disorganized house. And the last thing I want is a disorganized house. I need to make sure that my staff is in control 24/7. The minute that we lose control is the minute that we have problems.
Have you ever had issues with someone kind of forming too close of a bond with someone and kind of feeling either emotional fallout when like that person either left or was moved on for whatever reason? Or
well, I mean, I had a guy not too long ago. He was in the program about 6 months. Great guy. Has substance use history. He was out 2 days, overdosed and died. It breaks your heart when you hear that. You know, we're human. You know what I mean? We're human beings. So when you work with somebody so close for those 4, 5, 6 months, and they've stayed clean for that entire time, and you know, they get out in the community for 2 days, and and they overdose and die, then you start questioning yourself, like, did I do my job right? Did my staff do my job? Could I have done something more? But in all reality, we did everything we could. You know what I mean? We sent him to all the right places. It brought time and work and energy and sweat and tears into these people, and sometimes, you know, you don't get a positive outcome. It makes you question sometimes, but that's why you have to make sure you have boundaries, because when things like this do occur, and the connection does, they have a great group of people. We have our action team that goes out, and they'll come and they'll sit down and they'll talk with you, and they'll look at the case before they come and talk with you, and really talk to you one-on-one, to make sure, you know, you're in a good place, to make sure you can do your job right, and you know, to really know that you did everything that you could. There's nothing really more that you could have done. And things along that nature. We have our EAP and things like that. So that's something nice that as an organization that we have for our staff to utilize when things like that happen.
I feel like the job of being a worker at a halfway house is so just incredibly hard, because a lot of the times, like, no matter how much work you put in, someone can't really, like, as you said before, like, someone can't really help themselves unless they actually want to be helped.
Yeah.
And kind of going off of that, is that kind of one of the hardest parts about the work you do, or is there something that you find even harder?
So it was probably like a month and a half ago. It was on the news. We had a guy. He got into an altercation with his wife down in Norwich. Stole 2 cars. Went up to Willimantic, and that's where he met with police. It was an officer-involved shooting. He had a gun on him, and unfortunately, the officer shot and killed him. That gentleman was severe mental health when he was in my program, and he was on his medications. He was the nicest guy in the world. Very determined, wanted to help other guys. Really could be a face of a program type thing. The day he gets off his medications, he's off his medications for a few weeks, a month, turns into a monster. And unfortunately, that's what happened. He turned into a monster. And assaulted his girlfriend. Like I said, I think he stole, I think it was a total of 3 cars going up 395. And then ended up in Willimantic. Wellington? Anyway, had a gun on him, presented the gun to the police, and unfortunately they had to use lethal force. Yeah, what's the hardest thing in my job? Wow, that's a good question. You know, yeah, I think sometimes you look at it, it's a very stressful job. You got 38 guys stuck in a 14-room facility, one L-shaped hallway and a rec yard out back. I think the hardest thing for my job is making sure, and personally for me, you can ask my case managers, it could be different for them, being a program manager, making sure that the safety and security of all staff, clients, because we share, our building shares with the shelter. So there's 3 programs in the building that we work in. So we have somewhere along the lines, I have 38, shelter has 60. So there's over 100 clients, just clients alone in our building. So it's, the population between clients and staff is I have 2 staff in my program. There's 2 upstairs, but that's just 9 to 5. In the shelter, there's 1 person there on 24 hours. So it's a total of 4 staff members, 6 staff members, not including myself and the directors that are there during the day. So making sure that we maintain a safe and secure environment can be difficult. Making sure that, I hate fights. One of the last things I'd want to see is somebody get assaulted in my program. So that goes on to safety and security, making sure that I de-escalate situations to the best of my ability. If we get a guy that's, needs a higher level of care, or if he's just gotten to the point to where, authority doesn't mean anything to him, making sure that I discharge him from my program. and leave it on to the parole officer on where they want to take them or what they want to do with them. That's a big responsibility that I feel, so far I, have achieved. But you never know. You're going to get that bad apple every once in a while, you know what I mean? And then, the pluses of my job is when you see a guy walking down the street who is a client of yours and he's working and he's off parole and he's living in his own place and he has a girlfriend or a wife or, kids. That's the positives. And then the negatives is you watch the news and holy smokes, there's, my client that just discharged 2 months ago and there he is committing a new offense. And it's something, like I said earlier, you start thinking back, what could I have done better? What could we've done better as a program? I feel like I set these guys up for the best to succeed as possible. Granted, it's not a long-term program, like I said, but sometimes I do get guys that stay, the 4 months and really try to prepare them for society is huge. And I think we do a really good job at that.
It seems like to me, looking at like kind of the work you guys have to do is kind of like it's almost like there's never enough time in the day.
Never.
There's never
Oh gosh, no.
work that could be done.
I'm guilty of saying this is where I have boundary issues. Is I'm on my tablet. My wife hates me. I'm on my tablet. Sometimes I get home at 6, 7 o'clock, and I'm on my tablet working until 9, 10 o'clock. I work 2 jobs, so it's just one of those things that if I'm on my other job, I'll be working this job and sometimes not my other job. A lot of responsibility, but you know what? I think when I was little and going to high school, going to college, I've always just wanted to help people. You know what I mean? And if you don't want to help people, don't get into this field. I can promise you that. And yeah, there's the good days, and there are absolutely the bad days. Sometimes the bad days weigh out the good days. Yep. But let me tell you what, it's that when you have those good days and you see those clients, it gives me goosebumps. It really, I always go back to my staff and tell them the positives. So yeah.
Yeah, wow. Well, I actually think I've ran through my entire question list. And that was 45 minutes of making you talk.
No, dude, I love talking about my program. I can promise you that. Just a couple other things as a program that we're doing. The city of Middletown had a greenhouse, believe it or not, that they were going to take down when I first started working. I said, God, please don't take down that greenhouse. So I have this quote unquote greenhouse initiative that I'm really getting guys to going in, and we're doing this year. I kind of getting away from the vegetables. I really want to go through the flowers, so they can bring that to their kids, or down the road even, selling it at the local farmer's market or something like that. So it's as much hands-on and try to build that resume as much as possible so they can find employment or succeed, down, in the agriculture field, or even just getting money in your hands and having that financial literacy, you know what I mean, can make a big difference in the world. I had to bring up my greenhouse initiative. I had to bring it. That's a push. You might see. I keep telling my boss, you're gonna see that greenhouse initiative on the news one day, because it really is. It's great for the guys. It's not as a bloating thing, like, oh yeah, I'm starting this up. No, it's for my guys. My staff does absolutely nothing. I make sure every single guy that comes into the house knows, work in that greenhouse, do something with it, be a part of it some way, somehow, because that's a feel-good feeling, once you see that tomato plant or that flower coming out, it's like, wow, I did that, and, you maintain it and you take care of it, and next thing you know, we're going to be sending whatever fruits and vegetables I do have, it's going to go down to my kitchen. I had millions and millions of peppers last year. Oh my goodness, they were making relishes. They were making, this pepper stew, whatever they could do with peppers, they were doing with it. That's a good thing, And when it comes back to you and you're eating it, you're like, oh man, I grew that. That's pretty cool, Something for them to brag about. So I just have to throw that in there. Of course. So you got nothing else for me?
I don't think so. I've
Well,
got the entire thing.